What's going on, everybody? We are back. We are kind of live, but we are going to continue our discussion from last week with our friends Artie, Crawford, and Ben Wilkens from the NMFTA. Very, very excited for this. They have a huge announcement. We're going to get into that here in a little bit. Also, make sure to tune in next week where Nate's going to be back. We'll talk about that episode here towards the end as well. But we're so excited to continue the cybersecurity conversation. One of those important ones you can be having about your business right now with the rampant theft and fraud that is happening. And so excited to have our guest here and have my friend and coworker, Zach Barnhouse, on with me. So Zach's going to come in the studio here in a second.
Hey, Robert. How you doing?
Hey, brother. How you doing, man? So love the hat collection as always. Great to see.
Of course. Adding to it.
Yes. Doing our best to add as many hats as we can. So this whole everything stemmed from a conversation you and I had with Ben at the Freight Fraud Symposium in Dallas back in May. Talk about that a little bit, like kind of some of your takeaways from it. It was a great day of like just education, but I think there were some key points we both took away. Would love to kind of hear from you first on that.
Yeah, absolutely. The speakers throughout were great, from overhaul to boxes. There was a lot of, demise of the industry that was being talked about, heavy focus on Caffeine Group and all the current cybersecurity and the state of the current environment. Mm-hmm. But there were some really good takeaways. Some surprising info that I heard, especially from two boxes, not in our space too much, but in that retail side, with the fraud going through there, that was seriously eye-opening. Mm-hmm. That, I think it was a number like 58% of people, are owning up to having done those types of fraud before. And that completely blew my mind, some of those numbers. But, talking with, the insurance and really seeing that customers can start using their tech stack as possible deductions to their premiums, there's a lot of hope out there.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a conversation I've been having with a couple of different providers. And then also, like, one of the things I saw is that there's more and more education coming out. Certainly there are things need to be done as far as from a tactical perspective, but there's more awareness of, to your point, how rampant it is and where it stretches to. And the more and more we're educated on that, the more and more smart people we get around it, the more we're able to fight against the fraud, the theft, and make it harder for the bad guys. What do bad guys want? They want easy pickings, and let's be fair, logistics and transportation, pretty analog business. It's been pretty ripe for this for a long time. Yeah. And so we're kind of reaping what we've sown for the last 20, 30 years. But there's hope. And that's really what we're going to talk about today. A New Hope, great movie. I highly suggest everybody check that out. We're going to bring back in Artie Crawford, Ben Wilkens from the NMFTA. What's going on, fellas? I was going to call out.
Hey, Robert.
You guys had a great webinar today. Huge announcement. And I'm so excited for this. I know we got a little bit of a preview at the Fraud Symposium, Ben, when Zach and I were talking to you. I'm going to turn it over to you guys. Let's talk about it. Let's talk about the webinar and once again announce what you guys were working on for a while.
Absolutely.
Go ahead and hit it. Robert, thank you so much for allowing us to join. Zach, pleasure to meet you. And we're going to let Ben talk about the wrap up of the webinar today. And then hopefully he's going to let me announce what's coming forward. We'll see.
Well, yeah, of course. I'm, happy to be back. We obviously, as you mentioned, we spoke in Dallas at the Freight Fraud Symposium. Great conversation. I agree with you both. There was a lot of pretty eye-opening statistics getting talked about there. Some of those presentations, and just the different angles that the criminals are finding into the supply chain. It is pretty stunning, the extent. And that's really what led NMFTA to start digging into this issue of freight fraud, cargo crime, and how that crosses over with cybersecurity and cybercrime, because there's so many similar kind of attack targets in our tech stack, in our processes, and in our systems that are being leveraged by ransomware actors and by cargo thieves, right? So there's very, very similar tactics and techniques. And so we've spent a fair amount of time, and that's what we talked about in today's webinar. We've spent a lot of time digging into this issue and really trying to understand the extent of the issue, the scope of the problem, the pieces that are involved, the different actors that are involved, both on the criminal side and on the response and the defense side, and really trying to pull that information together and figure out what we can do to help the industry protect itself. And Artie, I'll let you jump on there and kind of let everyone know what it is that we've put together.
Well, I think before we let the cat out of the bag, right? We got to go just a bit further, right? Because and Ben's done a great job of setting me up for success on this one, right? There's no way I can not hit this ball out of the park. Well, I probably could, but could miss it somehow. But one of the things that, the boss came to us and said, "Hey, look, we need to really look at cargo theft." And we're like, the old man's crazy. We're cybersecurity guys. What's the old man talking about type of deal? Well, come to find out, we started scoping the problem and looking at the problem and realized that the problem is much more complex than the old Eddie Murphy film where they're selling cigarettes out of the back of the back of a box truck. Mm-hmm. And it's not as sophisticated as the whole Fast and Furious. Let's hack a truck on the roll and everything else, right? It's really a complex problem, and it starts all the way across from law enforcement to prosecutors to operational security, physical security, and then cybersecurity. And what Ben and I came up with, and what we've spent about the last probably 2 solid months working on, is a set of frameworks, right? It's the NMFTA, Cyber-Enabled Cargo Theft Reduction Framework, right? And what this book does, it takes a whole bunch of pieces of the puzzle, makes it so that it's understandable across the board of why are these companies having problems understanding this, and what relationships do they need to build on the operational side of the house, right? But more importantly, what pieces of the puzzle do they need to put in place in order to reduce the cyber-enabled cargo theft? The physical security, we didn't get into that. We brought it up that there's a convergence between physical security, operational security, and cybersecurity. But what we really focused on was the cybersecurity and the operational security, because there's some really good experts out there in physical security. And we're going to let those experts handle where you need your gates, guards, and guns at, and how you need your gates, guards, and guns, right? And what locks need to go here. We've got some super good experts that we work with routinely that will help you with that aspect. But what we did is put this comprehensive framework together that allows organizations to take one step at a time, digestible bites of information that we've talked about on the webinar today, but we also talked about it, in past episodes with yourself, Robert, that if we have these small, digestible, bite-sized pieces, these big how do you eat an elephant one bite at a time?
That's right.
Cybersecurity is that big elephant, and sometimes it's even a herd. So I think in this particular case, right, it gives us spray paint to let us know which one we've taken a bite of. We can put some check marks here and there, and we can start to just become a little bit more resilient each step of the way.
Awesome. That's huge. It's something that we talked about again in Dallas, and actually on the last episode, is there's more and more awareness everywhere. But one of the big missing pieces, like you mentioned, was the tactical things to put in place. What do I do to make this hard for the bad guys? And that's what you guys put together with these frameworks. And I know, Zach, you're getting a chance to look into these here as it's one of the things that you do. But going back to the conversations that we had down in Dallas between you and Ben, talk about some of the things that we see at GLCS with, maybe not individual clients, but some of the things we see overall with our portfolio of just kind of weaknesses and where people are really struggling with cybersecurity.
Oh, geez. We only have a limited amount of time here.
I know.
No, I mean, starting off, MFA is huge, right? Every company that we're working with.
Now translate that for the layman like myself, the big dummy.
Multi-factor authentication, right? So that's when you get the little pop-up on your phone. You got to key in your 6-digit code, right? So multiple factors to make sure that you are truly the person signing into that account. That's huge across all platforms, and that is something that our managed IT, we take that very seriously. That's a must that gets turned on. And then outside of that, everything from Windows updates, making sure that you're not on an end of life product. That's one of the biggest things, because once you hit end of life, you may have a working operating system, but you're not getting security patches anymore, which leaves those holes in your network where the bad actors can get through. I mean, those are probably the two largest, key factors of any organization. But, the cybersecurity training, the awareness training that we're doing, it just goes back to what Artie was saying, taking these things in small, manageable bites so that, we're not overwhelming the users, right? Because we don't want to put this dictionary of data in front of them and say, you've got to memorize this or else. Nobody's going to function that way.
Right.
So really breaking it down into those monthly trainings that we do, the really choreographed phishing simulations that are tailored to each department. Those are some of the biggest things.
Gotcha. And back to Ben and Artie. So obviously this is huge again with these very simple steps that organizations can take. Talk about like some of the efforts that went into that, some of the research, where'd you even start with some of this?
So I have to give my boss prop, right? Because I did start off and say, hey, look, we might have thought the old man was crazy, right? But come to find out, after we started digging into this, he was kind of onto something, which, okay, that's good at that point, right? And I'm going to let Ben talk about this a little more. I'll get into one piece of it. But what we found initially, right, before we get into the big chunks of it, what we found initially is nobody knew who to talk to who, and nobody knew what to do. And it was very interesting. I made just a couple quick cursory calls, right? And these are friends of mine that are in the business of understanding what's going on in the intelligence world, right? And I said, hey, look, I want to talk to you about what happens if, we've got about $400,000 worth of bacon missing, right? Would you all care about this? Right. And it was based off the cargo theft that happened in Daytona Beach during Bike Week,
yep.
Right? Where they did steal about $400,000 worth of bacon.
Yep.
So true event. And I said, man, it's not even on our radar. It's not really that important to us. I said, well, what puts it on your radar? He said, well, if you'd have told me $10,000 worth of 9mm rounds, that goes on my radar. And I was like, whoa, hold on. I'm telling you $500,000 worth of bacon and you don't care. But if I tell you $10,000 worth of 9mm rounds goes missing, you care. And all of a sudden, and I think that was a turning point in Ben and I's understanding that the problem was much more complex than what it seemed on the surface. Mm-hmm. Because that allowed us to reframe, rescope, and then start to talk to the right people, whether they were prosecutors, whether they were ASAs at the state level, or whether they were federal prosecutors. We were able to dig into some of our JTF friends with the FBI for cargo crime. And we were able to ask the hard questions and be guided down some paths that we really needed to understand. What do state investigative agencies like the baby FBIs, right, at the state level? How do state trucking associations get involved in these type of things? And I think that's the piece right there of understanding the law enforcement aspect that we were able to decouple and start to decipher so that we could apply it to what Ben's getting ready to talk about now.
Yeah, I think the biggest issue with tackling the cargo theft epidemic, if you will, is, like Artie mentioned, there's number one, who do you call? Who do you reach out to? You know, is it the county sheriff or the state police, or is it the state investigative agencies? Is it the FBI? Is it, who is it? And the answer, frustratingly enough, is always, it comes back as it depends. It depends on where the theft occurred. It depends on how much the value of the theft. It depends on the commodity. Like Artie said, it could be, it could change very rapidly from a non-issue, nobody really wants to pick up the ball and run with it, to hair on fire, everybody's looking at this, right? So depending what the product is. But the real problem is, well, there's a couple of issues that we discovered, and one of them is not being able to connect the dots enough between seemingly separate occurrences by one bad actor. Maybe just steals a load because they're hard up or they're going out of business, and they say, you know what, I'm gonna make a score before I go to a business.
Right.
Teasing that apart from a coordinated one-off here and a one-off here and a one-off here that are actually being orchestrated by somebody else, either in an Eastern European bloc country or with a criminal organization domestically. And so helping to shed light on that is going to be a huge part of solving the volume of cargo crime that we're seeing, and starting to build up that data set of, these are the threat actors we've seen, these are the lanes that it's happening in, these are the one-off occurrences, but they seem to be occurring with a pattern, maybe, if we look at them in a large data set. And so starting to have those conversations with the law enforcement entities as well, and say, look, it might be $400,000 worth of bacon, but we might see some correlation between that theft and another pattern somewhere else, that maybe it's not just a one-off opportunistic crime, right? And so starting to think about it that way. And then really to get back to kind of where we focused on this in this document, understanding the common threat vectors across all of these incidents. How did they know what trailer? How did they get compromise either credentials to your TMS or to a load board, or to how did they convince the driver to go to a new location for delivery mid transit, right? How did they make that contact? And we started to see there a lot of similarities between your cyber crime in general, the compromising credentials, stolen credentials, social engineering, massive. You can social engineer somebody into letting you access their database, or you can social engineer somebody into taking your shipment to another warehouse, right? It's the same skill set, it's the same techniques. So that's where we really dug in and said, okay, so if we know that cargo crime is being facilitated by cybersecurity weaknesses and the same techniques, how do we then connect the dots for a carrier or for a broker to say, we're talking about cybersecurity over here, we're talking about cargo crime over here, they're related. Do something to raise your bar on the cybersecurity side. It's also going to raise the bar and make it harder for the criminals to steal your freight, because they're using the same tool set. They're not using crowbars and cutting locks and all that. They're just telling your driver to deliver to a different warehouse and offloading it onto another truck, and it's gone.
Yeah.
So it's really connecting the dots more than anything. And then once we've done that, we take our cybersecurity frameworks from the roadmap to resilience guides and map those across and say, okay, if we're looking at organized crime, what are the techniques that organized crime is using? And how do they relate to cybersecurity controls that we have developed over here that you can implement for either, in a nominal cost or low cost, to make it that much harder for those organized criminal organizations to get into, your supply chain, essentially.
I think it's an important piece you mentioned is, I generally speaking, when people think of organized crime, what we think of the mafia, we think of the mob, and to be fair, we think of it as it's kind of dead here in America. It absolutely is not. Like, organized crime is very much alive and well. They work much more in the shadows. You don't see the Dapper Dons out there anymore. As cool as so that's a big piece I think people need to understand, is that these folks are in the shadows. They are working. They are very smart. But again, you can make their life a little more difficult. One of the things I think is really important too is, aside from the awareness and the training, is empowering people to understand that they are not helpless. We talked about this a little bit last week on the show. And so within these frameworks, what are some of the steps, what are some of the things y'all are taking to show people that they can actually fight against this and that they are not helpless? They are not just a victim of circumstance.
Yeah, so I think the first thing is understanding the issue, right? So we want to educate everybody about the threat actors that are involved, also the legal and regulatory kind of environment, and where that can be used to assist them, and where some of the gaps are there, so that you're not going into a situation. And I spoke with a carrier who had a load stolen, and they tried to file a report with the state police in the jurisdiction where the freight was stolen, and they were told that, well, you can do that. We absolutely, we'll take your report, we'll investigate, but you got to file it in person. Well, the carrier's not based in the state where the theft occurred. So
Right.
Now you're talking about having to send someone to another state to file a report in person with a state police agency. By the time that happens, everybody knows that freight's gone. And so the decision was, well, it's an insurance claim at that point.
Yeah.
But, understanding how this ecosystem works is number one. So you empower people to understand the problem, understand the players, and then some concrete steps that you can take to harden your organization. Like you said, this is, you're not necessarily going to outsmart or outgun the criminals, but what you can do is not be an attractive target for them, right? There's a limited amount of investment they want to make for a return before they're just going to go and look at somebody else. Mm-hmm. And so understanding your own weak points and putting controls in place, operational controls, sometimes in a process, like you're not allowed to change the destination on a shipment without X for verification, right? So whatever your operational control is there, maybe somebody else needs to sign off, maybe it needs to come from a trusted source in your trading partner's organization, and then understanding, just documenting, and just try to give you a couple of examples, documenting your own tech stack and your own technical inventory, so you understand where the weak points are. That's a step that is often overlooked, is maintaining your inventory. Mm-hmm. Understanding what you have, understanding what the gaps are in what you have, and then strategically and systematically working to fill those gaps. So it is, I don't think it's something that transportation can overcome. I think this industry, if I've learned anything in a career in transportation, it's give us the problem and we'll figure out a way to get through it, because every day in transportation is just one long series of problems. So we have the skill set and the stubbornness and the determination to get through this.
We do.
It's just understanding how to work together and how to put the pieces in the right order in your organization.
Yeah. Now, talking about these customers, what would you say is like one of the biggest motivators to get a customer to even report theft or security breaches? Because, we want to have this database so we can see the like for like and find the patterns, but that customers want to kind of sweep things under the rug sometimes to, if it's saving face of the company, or, this was under our $10,000 limit, so we're not going to report anything.
Yeah, Zach, I think that's a great question. And And I think we're really in that nascent stage of trying to dispel those myths, rumors, scarlet letters, as Robert talked about last week on the show, right? We're really at that nascent stage of we need to be able to share the good, bad, and the ugly, right? The bigger problem is what's the time and effort to report something that's not good, that a carrier or a broker doesn't think will matter. Well, it's interesting that we are finding out through certain contacts that they're now able to build RICO cases against, in some cases, right, where they're picking up 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 guys in a group or in a gang or whatever you want to call them, a bad actor hive, right? And they're putting a RICO case together to get into the millions of dollars so it can face federal prosecution at that point in time. And and this is where I think that once we get these rumors dispelled, that we'll be able to start to make traction, because you never know which one of those reports is the tipping point to initiate the RICO, to initiate the RICO prosecution or to initiate the prosecution. And without that taking place, right, we never get to that tipping point. Oh, they disappeared. Oh, they disappeared. Oh, they're a hit and get it type of organization. But in fact, if we continually report them, then we can build this, bad actor profile till we get to the point where it's actually prosecutable. And I know that's not a real word. I get it, but I'm from Kentucky and I can use it.
You're make up your own words.
That's right. I make up a lot of my own words. Absolutely.
Perfect. Well, with that, we're doing a quick commercial. We're going to come back. We're going to kind of, again, finalize some of this talk and give folks some tactical steps they can take. So we're doing a quick commercial now.
If your fleet's downtime looks like chaos, you're missing out on GLCS. In the fast-paced world of trucking and logistics, time is everything. Meet GLCS, your expert partner in managed IT services. We integrate seamlessly with your team, bringing seasoned IT professionals with deep transportation and logistics expertise. Imagine your software updates running smoothly, complex issues resolved quickly, and operations humming with efficiency. GLCS has your back. Our support doesn't just fix problems, it prevents them. With our industry connections and proactive approach, we keep your trucks rolling and your brokers working. Think of us as the added resource your company needs to unleash its full potential. Visit glcs.net today and keep your business driving forward. GLCS, where efficiency meets expertise.
Awesome. And we are back talking about some very, very cool things the NMFTA has been putting together through Ben and Artie's work. Focus here is on cybersecurity and resilience. And, with the big announcement today that they have published this framework for transportation organizations to create that resiliency program and that cybersecurity program that is to maybe not completely get rid of the bad guys, but it's going to make them a much less attractive target. I love that, actually, Artie, that you guys said that. So, what are the first? What's the first thing someone needs to do if they want to look at their cybersecurity program and say, not doing enough, we need to change? What is step one?
I think you always want to start with your user awareness training. I know, we say this all the time. It's so important that your team understands the risks they face in their role. And that's not just cybersecurity risks that they face, but that's the risks of, social engineering or vishing to get them to change a destination or to book a load with a subpar carrier or miss the fact that somebody is using a stolen carrier identity to book a load. So it's really, really important that very beginning is educating your team and making sure that they're aware of the risks they face. And then you can go a lot of different directions. And Nate, you mentioned a bunch of them earlier with sorry, Zach, just go to Nate. MFA patching, don't run end of life systems. Those kinds of things are obviously sort of your foundational practices that you build on from there. But I think, really, again, understanding the tech stack that you're operating and documenting that and keeping a current inventory of what it is that's operating in your environment is also kind of foundational core. You need to start there before you get too far into your plan. But Artie, I know you've got a lot of insight into this as well, so I want to give you time to jump on.
Oh, Ben, the only thing I was going to say here, right, is you missed an opportunity for step one to come out to the NMFTA website, and he usually never misses that layup ever, right? But step one is come out to the NMFTA website, right? Look through our documents. We've got our Road to Resilience campaign. We have our reduction, our cargo theft reduction campaign, our cargo theft reduction framework campaign that's out there taking place. And one of the things that you'll find out, right, as you start to get through these and start to break them down, there's a lot of similarities. But I'm hoping that when you start to look at these, right, and you start to implement cybersecurity controls that are in there, you're like, holy smokes, now I've got a reason why I'm implementing cybersecurity, because when I do this, it actually reduces my attack vector to cargo theft. And I think if we can give some organizations that are sitting on the fence a little push by introducing this cargo theft reduction framework to them, I think we've got them right there. Now, if they really need a big push, we'll reach out to Robert and have them push him because he's stronger than the rest of us.
I think you guys have kind of hit on this a little bit as we've talked about over the last 2 weeks. Really, this whole key is know your enemy. I'll use the wartime analogy. Know your enemy. The more you know about your enemy, the more you can anticipate what they're going to do, and the more you can, set up the defenses to make sure that they're not going to catch you by surprise. In an ever-evolving world of cybercrime where people can really basically mask anything they are doing, understanding that I think is one of those very, very crucial steps. So this is a framework that gives you that ability to know your enemy's looking for and really start to patch that up and seal those holes in the defense. So again, it just makes it a lot tougher to come after you, your network, and your freight.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think all of these go kind of hand in hand with your earlier in the year documents, your guidebooks for best practices with cybersecurity. You got the small fleet and owner ops, and then the mid-sized fleets. Those are huge, impactful documents for customers to be looking over.
We're kind of biased to it, Zach, but you're absolutely right. We think that they are very impactful, but what we have seen and what we have heard across the industry, and I feel if you heard the webinar earlier today, you heard Danny Roman talk about these same things, right? When we do cargo theft reduction framework, these things are just really usable, small chunks, implementable, right, and have huge ROIs. And I think by doing so and just taking these small steps, you realize it's not as hard as what people make it out to be. I think when people use the word cybersecurity, I think they want it to be hard because it's probably actually easier than implementing a safety program, right? Because you've got so many things in the safety program that you have to, pay attention to and look out for and make sure that, whether it's stop signs or following too close or taking off too fast or stopping too fast. It's like, oh my gosh, how the hell do you put all that stuff together? These are pretty basic things. Hey, implement MFA, have a good backup program, decide what day you're going to do patches. If you can afford to have a system that looks like your online system, great. Then go ahead and do that, right? Have a system that looks like that so you can test the patch before you put it on. If you don't, just know you have a good back out plan, right? For if the patch doesn't take. But these are just the things that you need to put into place, little bits and pieces at a time, and they'll really go a long way in the industry and to your cybersecurity posture and maturity.
I think that's a great point, Artie, is that cybersecurity is not easy, but it is simple. It truly, truly is. And with these frameworks, you guys are making it even simpler, also making up words here, for folks to come in and, again, just make it so your operation continues to move with the tumultuous environment that we are in right now. Shippers are looking for things like, hey, if somebody's not resilient, if they're not secure, I can't trust to send my freight there, because shippers don't want to be losing loads. They don't want to be losing the stuff. No matter what insurance is going to cover, they don't want to have to deal with that either. And so being able to show these things, say, hey, like either we've responded to previous thefts or we are being proactive, we are putting these things in place. You position yourself and have a differentiation between your competitors because you actually have a secure network.
Yeah, I think
you. Yeah, go ahead.
Artie.
I'm sorry. No, I think, Robert, you make an absolutely excellent point. And as the next couple of months come out, you're going to start to see some more appendixes or amendments to these frameworks, right, that we see, because vendors are now asking us for what type of questions should we be asking, right? What should the carrier that I'm working with, what should the broker that I'm working with, what should their cybersecurity posture look like, right? And that's a huge change in the industry, that we're now being asked to provide some type of guidance. It shows us that, okay, people are starting to think about this.
Yep.
So, and that's a good thing. And I think that's what Ben was going to say, but I cut him off, and I apologize.
No, that's fine. It's understanding that resilience and cybersecurity maturity are competitive advantages, right? In an increasingly competitive playing field where those questions are being asked, right? You have to have a baseline to be competitive, a baseline of cybersecurity, baseline of resilience. You have to have plans in place, because bad things are still going to keep happening, even if you do have defenses and you are prepared. We still have to, we have to show that, look, we're ready. Even if something bad happens, we're going to move your freight, and we're going to keep you in the loop, and we're not going to expose you to additional risk if you do business with us. That's a competitive advantage in the market today.
100%. Zach, anything to add on that?
No, I mean, shameless sales plug here at GLCS with Managed IT. The MFA, the EDR, the endpoint detection and response, the Rocket Cyber coverage, we handle all of that. So if there's any companies that are watching right now, GLCS has you covered for any of these needs.
Awesome. I think, guys, we've covered a lot of great stuff. First of all, Artie, Ben, thank you for your time. Thank you for coming on the last 2 weeks. Congratulations on launching this. This is huge. It's something the industry has needed for a while. And now we're getting away from the doom and gloom, the theft is going to happen, and getting to here's how we get in the way of that and make it harder. So, again, thank you. Congratulations. It's very, very exciting. And we're excited to work with you guys on making it even better.
Robert, Zach, thanks for having us on. We much appreciate it. Anytime that anybody needs anything, cyber@nmfta.org. It comes right into Ben and I's mailbox. And if you don't really want to deal with us, that's fine. Just come out to the website, take a look at our stuff. And if you find it useful, that's great. So I think in most cases, you're going to find something that's useful out there that will help you increase your cyber posture even that much.
Awesome. Make sure to check out Artie, Crawford, and Ben Wilkens on LinkedIn. Zach, how do folks get a hold of you?
Yep, you can email me directly at Zach, Z-A-C-H, @glcs.net. You can also find me on LinkedIn, Zach Barnhouse. I got the fuel pump in my name.
Fantastic. And as everyone knows, I'm Robert Bain, the strongest man in logistics. You can find me on LinkedIn, rbane@glcs.net. If you want to follow the powerlifting journey, you can check me out at Bane316 on Instagram. Next week, Nate Johnson is going to be back. Very excited to have him back from his little R&R. He's going to be interviewing the legendary Grace Sharkey. She has a new role. She's got some new stuff she's doing. Very, very excited for her to be talking about that and catching up with Nate. He tells all about his adventures in Europe. He's on a boat right now, hopefully with his flippy floppies, and he's on a dolphin doing flips and whatnot. So, guys, once again, thank you so much. Everybody else have a great week. Have a great weekend. Continue driving forward with purpose and innovation.